The shovel hit frozen ground with a dull, hollow thud. Martha Bell didn't flinch. She just pressed her boot harder, letting the metal bite deeper. The wind howled low through the trees like a wolf too tired to kill. Snow fell in sheets coating everything in silence so thick it felt like memory. She wasn't digging for the dead, not yet. No marker stood at her feet. No name had been chosen. But she dug anyway, shoulders hunched, knuckles, red breath, short like it was ration. Behind her, the old cabin creaked tired from another winter that refused to end. Then a sound. It wasn't the shovel, wasn't the wind. It was small, high, a cry. Martha stopped mid-motion. Her fingers tightened around the wooden handle. She looked up, heart stuttering in a chest that hadn't beat with urgency in years. There it was again, closer. A thin, fractured wail like glass cracking under weight. She dropped the shovel. Snow reached her knees by the time she reached the fence line. Her bones protested with every step, but something louder pushed her forward. Half buried near the paddock, wrapped in a stained military blanket, was a bundle. And it moved. Martha fell to her knees. Her hands shook as she pulled the cloth back. A face blue-lipped, soaked in melting frost, turned toward her. Eyes barely open. Skin like porcelain, left out in the cold too long. A baby. Alive, but only just. And around his tiny neck, fastened by a leather cord, hung a pendant shaped like a hawk, cracked straight through the middle. Martha swallowed hard. Her voice, when it came, was more breath than sound. "Oh God, what do I do with you?" But her hands already knew. She lifted the child against her chest and turned away from the grave. Martha Bell had lived alone on that stretch of frozen earth for 13 winters. Folks in town said she preferred it that way. That after her husband passed and her daughter's cradle went cold, she'd chosen silence over sorrow, wilderness over whispers. And maybe they were right, but what they never knew, what Martha never told, was that she didn't choose anything. She just stayed, because leaving would have meant carrying the weight with her, and some grief is too heavy to move. The cabin she called home stood at the edge of Raven Hollow, tucked between brittle pine trees and long-forgotten cattle fences. The windows had long lost their shine. The garden was a patch of frozen regret. And the only company she kept was a mule too old to pull and a radio that hadn't worked since the spring after her son stopped writing. Her son Daniel had been the last thread. He'd gone to war like his father before him, with a clean-shaven face and a folded letter in his breast pocket that simply read, "Come home safe." But letters stopped coming, and no body returned. Just silence. Martha didn't mourn like other women. She didn't wear black or weep in church. Instead, she packed away the cradle, hung his jacket in the barn, and every Sunday she baked 2 loaves of bread, one for herself, one for no one. When the storm hit 3 days ago, it hadn't scared her. Nothing much did anymore. She'd nailed the shutters shut like she always did, stacked the firewood just high enough to outlast the cold. The winds howled like they wanted something, but she didn't answer. She hadn't meant to dig a grave that morning. Not really. But her mind had gone still enough to let her body act on its own. Spade, the earth, the snow, the silence. It all made sense in a way grief often does when no one's watching. But then came the cry, the bundle, the boy. And now he was inside, wrapped in wool, skin like porcelain, breath shallow but real. Martha sat beside the stove knees, aching hand pressed gently to the child's chest. It rose and fell in fluttery beats. She hadn't held something so small since she wouldn't think of that. The boy had no name, no note, no explanation. Just that hawk pendant broken clean through. She boiled water, stripped off the wet blanket, found a faded scar on his temple, raw and red like something done in haste. He wasn't white, not fully, maybe not at all. His hair was dark, his features sharp or older, like the earth had shaped him instead of flesh. That mattered in these parts, to some, not to Martha. She moved on, instinct rubbing his arms, rocking without sound, whispering a lullaby she hadn't sung since the day her daughter went quiet in her sleep. And when the baby stirred, letting out the faintest whimper, something in her cracked. Not like glass, but like ice, soft at first, then flooding with heat. She didn't ask who left him, didn't ask why. The world had never offered her answers, only echoes. What mattered now was the fire burning beside them, and the breath she felt against her wrist, and the thought, terrible and holy, that maybe this child hadn't been abandoned to die. Maybe he had been delivered to be saved. By dawn, the storm had worn itself out. The snow didn't stop, it just gave up, falling softer now like ash after fire. The world outside Martha's cabin looked as if it had been erased and redrawn in shades of white and sorrow. Fences buried, trees snapped at the waist. The windmill at the edge of her land leaned eastward, tired and half-broken. Inside, the baby slept near the stove, in a laundry basket lined with wool and faith. Martha hadn't closed her eyes all night. She moved slow now, not out of fatigue, but reverence. Every motion felt borrowed. Her hands checked the baby's pulse, every hour laid cool cloths across his brow. The fever had come fast, burning behind his eyelids like a quiet war. He didn't cry, not really, just whimpered now and then, like he was dreaming of cold places. Mid-morning, Martha stepped outside for wood. That's when she saw it, the tracks. Fresh, deep, headed straight toward her fence. She followed them with her eyes to where they disappeared behind the barn. Not animal, not hers. Too wide, too steady. Boots. Someone had come through the storm. She tightened her coat eyes, scanning the tree line. A ripple of unease curled in her belly. Not fear, she didn't scare easy, but something older. Instinct. Then came the sound of hooves. 2 riders. She knew the lead man before he even dismounted. Sheriff Duncan Riles, born mean-aged worse. The man behind him was Eli Garth, a traitor who'd once accused Martha of hiding runaways on her land. That had been 8 winters ago. He never apologized. Duncan tipped his hat with a sneer. "Morning, Miss Bell. Heard your chimney was smoking strong through the storm. Mighty fine fire for someone living alone." Martha said nothing. She kept her hands visible, arms crossed. "You see anyone pass through?" he asked, voice casual. "Couple folks in town say they saw prints near your fence. Heading west." Martha's jaw worked silently. "Then just snow," she said. Eli spit into it. "Storm's a good cover for all kinds of things. If I were looking to smuggle something, I'd do it on a night like that." The baby stirred inside. She didn't blink. Duncan leaned forward slightly in his saddle. "If you do see anything strange, anything at all, you'll let us know, won't you?" "I don't much look through windows," she replied. "And I don't much answer them either." That earned her a long look, sharp-measured, the kind that left a sting even when it passed. Then just like that, they turned their horses and rode off. She didn't go inside right away. She stood there in the snow, heart hammering, steady, the cold biting her cheeks. She was no outlaw, never had been. But the law in Raven Hollow didn't look kindly on mercy, especially mercy for the wrong kind of child. Later that afternoon, something appeared on her windowsill. A small bundle of dried wild tobacco tied with red thread. Not left by wind. Not from town. Martha stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing the frayed string. A message. Not a threat. A sign. The Comanche knew, and they were watching. That night, the baby wouldn't stop whimpering. She held him close, rocking in the chair her husband had built when they were young and foolish and thought life had a plan. She whispered to him, not words, but hums, rhythm, memory. Songs her mother used to sing when the world still made sense. She pressed her lips to his forehead. He was burning again. "You're safe," she murmured. "Even if I'm not." But even as she said it, Martha knew the snow might have quieted. But the trouble had only just begun. The next evening came slow and gray. The sky hung low over Raven Hollow, heavy with unshed snow, as if the clouds themselves were waiting for permission to weep. Martha sat by the fire, the baby curled in a makeshift cradle beside her, a wooden drawer lined with wool cotton, and a prayer she hadn't said out loud in years. His fever had broken sometime around dawn, and he now slept with the heavy, slack breathing of the utterly spent. That's when she heard the knock. Not on the door, not on the walls, on her soul. Something in her spine straightened. She stood, moved to the window, pushed aside the curtain with care. A figure stood just beyond the porch alone, still outlined in the pale blue of coming dusk. She wasn't dressed for snow, just a thick fox fur cloak, a long skirt, and hair braided into 2 cords that hung past her chest. Her arms were folded, but not in defiance, in patience. Martha opened the door but said nothing. The woman nodded once. "I came for the child." Her voice wasn't sharp or cold. It was steady, ancient, like a mountain finally deciding to speak. Martha didn't step aside. She didn't need to. "He's inside," she said quietly. The woman didn't move. "I won't take him unless you place him in my hands." They stood there, 2 women born of different worlds, but tethered by something beyond maps and bloodlines. The wind moved around them without force. Even the snow seemed to pause. Finally, Martha opened the door wide. "Come in," she said. The woman entered, her footsteps soft on the worn wood. She crouched beside the drawer, one hand hovering just above the child's cheek as if permission had to be granted by breath alone. She didn't touch him. "Your name?" Martha asked. "Asha, daughter of the Hawk clan, sister to the child's father, and now, his only blood." Martha nodded slowly. Her throat felt tight. "He was left?" she asked. "His mother died beneath the snow. My brother died beneath bullets. The baby vanished in the blizzard. We thought him gone, until the tobacco bundle returned untouched." Asha turned to Martha. "That's how we knew someone worthy had him." They sat beside the fire. A long moment passed before either spoke again. "I didn't mean to keep him," Martha said, voice low. "But I wasn't ready to give him up either." Asha didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a small cloth bundle from her coat and unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a carved medallion shaped like an arrowhead, but adorned with two birds in flight. "Our people give this to children who belong to more than one path," she said. "Not to mark division, but honor duality." She placed the medallion gently on the table. "He will be known among us as Coda, which means echo of storm." Martha swallowed hard, and to me, Asha looked her in the eyes. "You may name him anything your heart needs." Martha stared at the child. His hands were curled near his chin. He looked peaceful, no longer lost, just here. "I call him Nathan," she said after a long silence. "Not after anyone, just a name I never got to give." Asha nodded once. "Then Nathan Coda he shall be." They sat in silence a while longer. The fire crackled, the world outside softened into dusk. Before she rose to leave, Asha looked once more toward the baby. "He has two roots now," she said, "one of blood, one of grace." Then almost as an afterthought, she added, "And when the time comes, the boy will know which wind carried him first." She turned to go, but at the door she paused. "There are those who won't understand. White or native blood doesn't always mean belonging." Martha's voice was quiet but unwavering. "Then I'll teach him that belonging is earned and never owed." Asha bowed her head just once, and then she vanished into the snow as silently as she had come. The first knock came at noon, firm, measured. Not the kind that begged for entry, but the kind that expected it. Martha froze at the sink soap still on her hands. She dried them with an old towel, smoothed her apron, and looked once toward the corner where Nathan slept, his tiny body swaddled in the red shawl she'd found in the bottom drawer of her late daughter's dresser. Then she opened the door. Sheriff Duncan Riles stood there again, alone this time, but no less dangerous. His coat was dusted with snow, his eyes sharp under the brim of a gray hat that had never once been tilted in apology. "Morning, Miss Bell," he said too politely. "Mind if I come in?" She didn't step aside. "Depends on what you're bringing with you." He offered a folded piece of paper. "Warrant." Martha didn't take it. "Word is you've got something inside don't belong to you. Child, maybe. Not yours, not white." The words hung between them like smoke too thick to breathe. "I haven't broken any laws," she said. "You've broken expectations," he replied. "And that tends to get folks rattled out here." He shifted his weight, peering past her shoulder. "All I'm asking is to see for myself. Make sure the child's safe. That's all." Martha's hand closed around the edge of the door. "He's warm, he's fed, he's got a name now, he's safe." Duncan nodded slowly. "And what happens if the tribe comes looking? If there's a claim, you ready to fight a blood right?" She didn't answer. His voice hardened. "You know how this ends, Martha. If not with me, then with men less patient." She stepped outside, closed the door behind her. Then without raising her voice, she said, "You've come far, Sheriff. Might as well leave with something." And she raised the shotgun. It wasn't aimed at him, not directly, just near enough. His expression changed, not fear, but calculation. "You think that old thing will save you?" "No," she said. "I don't need saving." A beat of silence, then Duncan raised his hands. "This your final stance?" "No," she whispered. "This is me drawing the line." He didn't push it, not that day. He turned, walked off without a word, but his shadow stretched long across the snow. That night, Martha didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with the boy in her arms. She held him like something sacred, not because he was fragile, but because he wasn't hers, and yet her heart refused to believe it. She thought of Asha, of the medallion with the twin birds, of what it meant to claim something with no blood in it, only choice. She whispered to the boy, "I don't know where you'll end up, Nathan. I don't know if this porch will be your memory or just a pause. But if I can choose one thing before I go, it's that you'll never feel like someone else's burden." By morning, the wind had stilled. She packed quietly. A single satchel, 1 bottle of goat's milk, 3 clean cloths, her daughter's shawl, the medallion, and the seeds Asha had left on her porch the night before. She left the shotgun behind, not because she trusted the road ahead, but because she didn't want the boy's journey to begin under the weight of fear. She saddled the old mule, wrapped the boy against her chest, and rode west, toward the line where her world ended and his began. Halfway up the ridge, she looked back once. The cabin was just a shape now, a shadow of what had been her shelter, her prison, her chapel of silence. Then she turned forward and didn't look back again. They rode into Comanche land at twilight. Smoke rose gently from low fires in the valley. Children's laughter echoed through bare trees. The air smelled of meat, of cedar, of something warmer than memory. No one stopped her. When she reached the central clearing, Asha was already waiting. So was the chief, tall, scarred, dignified, wrapped in a cloak that moved like river water when he turned. He approached without weapons, without command. When he reached Martha, he spoke softly. "You carried him home." Martha nodded. "I tried to carry myself with him." The chief looked into her eyes, then down at the boy who now slept, cheek pressed to her collarbone. "Then your journey was not for nothing." He extended his arms. But he didn't take the child. He waited. And when Martha finally placed Nathan into his embrace, it wasn't surrender. It was a blessing. And the fire crackled low beneath a sky splashed in gold. Martha sat on a wool blanket near the edge of the Comanche encampment, her hands wrapped around a wooden bowl of warm stew she hadn't touched. The boy Nathan slept nearby, curled beside a young woman who had woven his name into a song just hours ago. He hadn't cried once. Not when she handed him over. Not when the shawl came off her shoulders. Not even when she kissed his forehead and whispered the name that was never hers to give, but had somehow always belonged to him. He crossed the fire. The chief sat in silence. He hadn't spoken much since her arrival, only listened, nodded, watched her with eyes that understood more than words ever could. Asha approached with quiet steps and lowered herself beside Martha. She offered a bundle tied in sinew string cloth, soft and aged with something light wrapped inside. "For your hearth," Asha said simply. Martha opened it. Inside lay a pouch of seeds, dark and speckled like night rain. Alongside it, a carved piece of driftwood etched with the outline of a hawk wing spread wide. "We mix them with tobacco," Asha explained. "Burn it when memory feels too far. The hawk brings it close again." Martha's hands closed around the offering. She didn't speak because anything she said would crack. Instead, she asked, "Will he remember me?" Asha tilted her head. "Do you remember the hand that steadied you before your first steps? The scent of arms that wrapped you through your first winter?" Martha nodded faintly. "Then so will he." That night, the tribe sang, not loudly, not to perform, but as though speaking to the ground itself. Songs of return, songs of quiet thunder. Martha didn't join. She just sat by the fire, her shawl around her shoulders again, the bowl still untouched in her lap. She didn't feel like she'd lost something. Not really, because something was still glowing inside her like coals beneath ash. Not gone, just changed. At dawn, she prepared to leave. No ceremony, no speeches. Just nods, brief touches, eyes that spoke what mouths didn't dare. The chief approached with the boy in his arms. Nathan's eyes were sleepy, his curls wild and sweet with the scent of smoke. The man lowered himself and let the boy stand. Nathan toddled over. He didn't say a word. He just pressed something into Martha's palm. A small object warmed from his fingers. She looked down. A stone smooth and flat with the faint outline of a bird carved into it. Tiny wings spread over etched snow. Martha looked up, and for the first time in years, her smile was not a mask. "Go, little hawk," she said softly. "Fly far, but don't forget the wind that carried you." Nathan blinked at her, then turned and walked back, one hand in Asha's. They didn't ride away. They simply walked into the trees, into the light, into a future she wasn't part of, but had helped make possible. The cabin didn't feel empty when she returned. It felt quiet, but not the kind of quiet that wounds, the kind that listens. Martha stepped inside the door, creaking just like it always had. The fire still lived in the hearth, glowing low, like an old friend waiting up. She didn't touch the cradle, didn't pack it away. She let it stay by the stove lined with wool smelling faintly of cedar and milk. A small hollow carved out of winter where something once fragile had survived. Above the mantel, the hawk medallion hung from a rusted nail, catching bits of morning light, like tiny flares of memory. She placed the carved stone Nathan had given her beside it, nestled into a knot she'd whittled with the point of a kitchen knife. The bird's wings faced the window as if still watching for his return. Each Sunday, Martha baked 2 loaves of cornbread. One stayed on the kitchen table. The other she wrapped in cloth and placed gently on the flat stone by the creek the same one she used to leave for the hawks. And for him, sometimes it disappeared by morning, sometimes not. She never looked to see who took it. Weeks passed, then months. Spring arrived not with color, but with weight, the kind that sinks snow into soil and demands something new grow in its place. The creek thawed, the fields softened. Her garden sprouted where only weeds once dared. She planted the seeds Asha gave her, mixing them with tobacco and lavender. When the smoke curled up from her chimney each dusk, it carried more than scent. It carried belonging. One day she found a ribbon tied to the porch handle, red frayed and faded at the ends. She didn't untie it, just touched it gently with her fingers, the way one might greet a shoulder long missed. Another day a feather appeared on her windowsill. Not dropped, placed. She left it there. Years passed like wind through tall grass, seen only in how the field bends, not in how it sounds. The town stopped talking, stopped judging, stopped wondering what happened out there by the hollow. Martha never told them. Some things aren't for sharing, they're for keeping. She aged, but not away. She walked slower, but straighter. Her hands never stopped working, but now they worked for more than routine. They worked for memory. And then one autumn morning, a shadow crossed the porch. She heard the soft knock, not urgent, not loud, just certain. When she opened the door, he was there. Not a baby, not a boy. A young man, braided hair, tall, smile, quiet as dusk. He held out something, a bundle of cornmeal wrapped in cloth. He didn't speak, didn't need to. She opened her arms and he stepped in. For 3 nights they sat by the fire. He slept on the floor beside the stove. She cooked stew with too much salt. He didn't complain. He asked if the cradle was still there. She said it had never left. On the last morning, he placed a small drawing on her table, a house with smoke curling up, a hawk flying above it, and 2 figures sitting on the porch side by side. Before he left, he whispered, "I call you Mount because I never had to ask if I could." She nodded once. "And I answer because I always knew you would." When he rode off that time, she didn't cry. She stood by the door, one hand on the frame, and whispered into the wind, "You are not gone. You are the fire that stays." If this story warmed something quiet in you, tell us in the comments what fire still stays in your life. And if you believe in stories that whisper, not shout, subscribe to Still Winds of the West, we'll keep the fire lit for you every week.